Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord.
Well, good morning. So glad you've joined us today. My name's Scott. I have the privilege of serving here as lead pastor. If you're a guest with us, we're really glad that you're here today. We've been in a message series learning a bunch of how-tos around our identity and our purpose as human beings in the world. And I want to talk to you this morning specifically if you're a parent, been a parent, going to be a parent, have grandkids, about how to practice patient parenting. How to practice patient parenting. Here's my best definition of parenting. This comes through blood, sweat, and tears of having done it. Here it is. You ready? I'm going to put it on the screen for you. Parenting is hard work done under pressure. Parenting's hard work done under pressure. If you've been a parent, you know you only have so long with your kids. And you wonder, as you are trying to raise them, if you're doing it right. You wonder what it is they're actually supposed to be. All the while, you're trying to juggle your own life, your own career, your own desires and longings and dreams. And you're often, as a parent, at least this has been my experience, you are wondering, what is it that is supposed to be happening exactly as I'm raising these kids? You ask questions like, at least I have, can I actually do this? And the looming fear I think any honest parent wrestles with is, what if I don't get it right? Parenting is hard work done under pressure. So here's what I've got for you today. I've got some encouragement and some tools and some hope about how to practice patient parenting. Now, for those of you who are guests, you have no idea who I am. You're like, who is this guy? Why is he talking? I just need to give you a couple of bona fides, okay? So you don't say, well, some guy who's never had kids is going to talk about raising kids. I've got a picture here of my kids, and just so you can see, we have been through something. We at least made it to this point. We at least got this far. And my wife and I have been married for a hot minute now, and she's amazing. She's the better half of our duo. And so I'm talking to you out of my own experience, my own mistakes, and I want to help you take some steps forward. So let me give you this morning, if I could, if you want to take notes, we have sermon notes. You can write them on your phone as well. There's been a study that if you write something down, you're 75% more likely to remember it. So we have sermon notes for that exact purpose. So I want to give you 3 keys to patient parenting. Here's the first one. We're going to put it on the screen for you so you can follow along. Number 1, you and I have to unearth our assumptions. Unearth our assumptions. What am I talking about? Well, what we just read is from the book of Ephesians. Ephesians is a letter that was written in the New Testament by the Apostle Paul to a church in ancient Ephesus. I'll show you some pictures here in a minute. But he's writing this letter, and right out of the gate, he says something, even if you are not a religious person, I think you like and agree with if you are a parent. I'm going to put it on the screen again for you in case you missed it. Here it is. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Again, you're just trying to get this done. Parenting is hard work done under pressure. And so I honestly think if we sold t-shirts that, you could give to your kids, so you would put them on them and they would go, oh, I'm supposed to obey my parents. If we were to sell bumper stickers in the coffee shop, they might be popular, even if you don't agree with, you don't know much about the Bible. But here's my question. Wouldn't it be great if that's all you had to do? We're just going to quote a Bible verse at you kids, and then the kids are supposed to do what we say. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that relieve a lot of parental stress? Now, I want to just tell you that is not what the Apostle Paul is suggesting. If that is your approach to parenting, if you think you can just quote Bible verses at kids and they'll just do what you want, I'm going to call that parenting by rules. It's a little bit like painting by number. Have you ever gone into someone's home and you see this beautiful picture and your opinion of that person changes and you think, wow, what a talented artist. And you ask them, how did you paint that? And they say, oh, it was just paint by numbers. right? Your understanding and valuing of that person as an artist plummets, doesn't it? Because you didn't really do anything. You have no actual skill. And so parenting by rules, I want to suggest to you, is parenting on autopilot. And parenting requires more. And here's what Paul's doing, though, when he writes this phrase in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1. He's pointing out the cultural expectations we have about our kids. And this is a question. What is it that our kids are supposed to do? Let me give you a little bit of context and background for why Paul is writing this letter, and it might help make sense of your own assumptions as a parent, unearthing your own assumptions. Paul's writing this letter to people in the ancient Roman Empire around the 1st century BC. He's writing to the city of Ephesus. You can go to the ruins of Ephesus, beautiful, beautiful ruins that you can visit there. We've got some pictures for you. It is located in, if you want to know where Ephesus is, in Turkey. Near the Aegean Sea. If you Google it, you can find it there. Ephesus was a port city. It was home to soldiers. There was, we would call it a tech center today. They were engaged in metallurgy, working with metals. It was kind of referred to as the gateway to the Eastern world in the Roman Empire. It's a very important city. It'd be like the St. Louis of the Roman Empire. And Paul's writing to people who lived in this city of about 250,000 people around the 1st century BC. And they had some assumptions, like you and I do, about what you're supposed to do as a parent. And here are some of the assumptions. It worked like this. If you were a male, you were at the top. And you essentially had unlimited power. You even could choose if you wanted, and it's not that this was rampant, but you certainly had the right to do it. If when your child was born, they lived or died. Often, if you had a girl wasn't as valuable, and you might sell that girl into slavery. You might do what was called exposure, where they would take the baby and they would leave the baby in the marketplace, or they would leave the baby outside, and whatever happened is what happened. You could punish your kids as harshly as you wanted. You had the freedom, if you wanted, to whip and beat your kids. You weren't taught to pamper your kids or play with your kids or laugh with your kids. These were just some basic assumptions. I'm, again, not saying everybody did this. There were homes full of love. There's record of that in history. But here's what happens. Assumptions lead to expectations. And here was the expectation that almost everybody in that society operated with. They had in their brains that they were about the glory of Rome. So it was about you having honor. And it was about avoiding shame. It was what was called an honor-shame culture. It would be like modern-day Japan. It was all about, am I accruing honor for myself, or am I bringing shame on myself? And so there were these things that were referenced in the culture called house codes. And it was put on the fathers of the houses to keep these house codes. And so if you kept the house codes, then you would accrue honor and you would avoid shame. And it was how households should operate so that the culture would work. So in other words, here was the assumption that led to the expectation. There was something that was more important than raising your kids. That's how the culture worked. It kind of worked like this. I've got a little image I put together for you. It was like the glory that you were looking for, or that you were expected to bring to Rome or to yourself, was larger than what you were doing with your family. And what happened in that culture, to keep that order, if you were a wife, you had to be silent. If you were a child, you had to obey. And if you were a slave, you had to do what you were told. And there was this cultural expectation that this is just how the world worked. And so here Paul, in the middle of this, writes this letter to people who are beginning to follow Jesus. And he says, I'm going to tell you, there's a part of that that's actually right, that children are supposed to obey their parents. And he says it's not just to keep everything in place culturally. He calls it right, and the word he uses for right in the Greek language is the word where we get our sense of virtue or goodness. He said this is actually good for everybody. Now, that's a bunch of historical assumptions. Let me talk about you for a second. We have assumptions about our kids too. Now, there are some older assumptions that I grew up with. I'm going to say a phrase, and I want you to repeat the last part of the phrase, because I guarantee almost everybody in the room knows the last part of this phrase. Here's some older assumptions about children. Ready? Children are to be seen and... Oh, see? You want to cry? I'll give you... Yes, indeed. So those are a little bit older. Maybe we don't operate by them. So I thought, well, how do we get the assumptions we all carry around in our heads as parents? And so I turned where you would turn. I don't use this often, but I turned to ChatGPT. So here's what ChatGPT said about the assumptions American parents have about their kids. So assumptions are things like kids are about this is the first thing ChatGPT said. It's about self-fulfillment for parents and companionship for parents. That children are about achievement and upward mobility. Here's the great value American parents, all of us, have about our children. We believe that all of our children are full of potential. And while we may not use the language of sin, we would say it is a sin to waste your child's potential. And so we are taught as parents, we're to chase our child's potential, no matter how much money it costs us, how much travel ball we have to be a part of. It is our job as parents to maximize their potential so that they do well and we do well as a family. That's a cultural assumption. And then this is mine. I think this is something that takes place in people's minds. I'm somehow supposed to do all this. I'm supposed to maximize this little human with as little trauma as possible. How do I keep from passing on my pain to the next generation? Then ChatGPT said, for biological self-continuity, some people have kids and they just say, well, we're supposed to. If we don't have kids, then the human race stops. I just want to suggest to you that we're in a place where we don't really know the purpose of the family. Here's my question. So what's the purpose of a family again? There really aren't a lot of voices arguing for the primacy of the family. If you've done any studying, you know the birth rates in America are below the replacement rate. So you need 2.1 births per mother in order to keep a population growing, and the United States is at 1.6. And a lot of people say the reason that is, one of the reasons is there's a sense of despair and a lack of purpose and understanding about the meaning and value of the family. So, let's bring this down. What are your assumptions about your role and your kids' role? I just want to suggest to you that the way we operate, I call it Project Self in America, has colonized our understanding of family, and so we don't quite know how to fit it. We're confused. And so we're kind of in the place, again, that little graph I gave you. It seems like there's some sense of this glory we're supposed to achieve for ourselves, and somehow our family fits in it. Maybe you see it differently. You're like, well, no, the family is the bigger thing, and then the glory I'm looking for is this small thing. Or maybe you sometimes say, well, couldn't we put those two things together, and the overlap is where we're going to be? All I'm trying to say here is this points out the fact that as parents, we need some sort of pattern. So if I could, I want to give you an ancient pattern. It's been around for a couple thousand years now, and parents have used it again and again, and it's worked. And there's two parts to it. What are kids for? And I want to give you an ancient poem in the middle of the Bible known as the Psalms. The Psalms for a couple thousand years. If you have an old-fashioned Bible and you open it, right in the middle are the Psalms. There's 150 different songs, poems that function as prayers, songs, ways to connect with God, ways to worship. And in Psalm 127, there's a pattern that's offered to you and I as parents. Here's the pattern. Psalm 127, verse 4. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. How blessed is the one whose quiver is full of them. I have right here, I don't know if you can see it, but I have down here a little, I'll pick it up so you can see it. I made this stand, and I have it on my desk, and I have, as you can see, 3 arrows in it. And I put it right where I do my work when I'm doing computer stuff. And the reason I put it there, it sits about right here as I'm sitting there, is I want to be reminded that this is my kids, my 3 kids, are more important than what I'm doing on this screen. So, like arrows in the hands of a warrior, that's what kids are like. That's what they're for. What does an arrow do? An arrow is something that you shoot beyond you. And an arrow has behind it an entire apparatus that is designed, energy, forces, abilities, to send that arrow beyond you. And there's much more behind the arrow than the arrow itself. So all of that is happening so the arrow can fly beyond me. So I want my kids' character to be greater than my character. I want my kids to have less dysfunction than I have. I want my kids to have a deeper sense of purpose than I have. It's not so much about upward mobility that I want to put into my kids as it is about them having nobility. I borrowed this lens that's helped me a lot in understanding these values as a parent, called the 5 capitals. And they're just common things we use as capitals in our culture to make sense of things. And it might help you just in your own life, even if you're not a parent. But usually it goes like this. This is the way our culture values things. It goes, at the top is just how much money do you have? It's the financial capital that you have. It's are you successful? Are you making enough money? Do you how wealthy are you? Your net worth, we even call it a financial reality. Then it goes, it's the intellectual capital that I have. It's the degree that I have. It's what I know. It's my skills. It's my competence. Then it goes to my physical capital. How beautiful am I? Am I healthy? Am I whole? Do I take the right supplements? Then it's relational capital. Yeah, I mean, relationships are important, right? I mean, I should be connected to people, and that's important. And then usually down in our culture, at least, down at the bottom is a sense of spiritual values, like the kind of person that you are, the character that you have. And often, this ranking system that I think maybe operates on autopilot for most of our culture is the way we think about our kids. Like, well, I want them to have a lot of money so I need to make sure that they make a lot of money. And then I need to send them to the right school, and I need to give them the right clothes so that they don't look stupid in front of their friends. And then, you need to pay attention to your relationships. And it would be nice if they're spiritual, but is it that important? The flip of God's values versus culture values, it flips it. It says that the most important thing is the kind of person that they become. Then out of that, after who they become as a person, it's the relationships that they have. That's the important thing about them. Then I want them to be healthy. And then I want them to know things. And in the end, I want their money to serve all of those other things. Do you see how that's fundamentally different? And I'm sending my arrow in one of those directions. So why are they with you? That's the second question. In Psalm 127, verse 3, the psalmist says, "Children are a gift from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward." The assumption is that there are not that many gifts that happen in life. Life itself is a gift. So when you have a child, you are given a life to tend. The creative force that put in place everything that you see, God, gifted you in this exact moment with the child or the children that you have. That means, as a parent, that what you do with your child is an immense part of your purpose in life. So I just want to suggest the shift begins to look something like this. It's God's purpose in giving you children. Now, I'm not saying if you don't have children, you have no purpose. I'm simply saying if you've been given children, God's purpose in giving you children is greater than everything else. How do you get to that assumption? How do you create that environment? Well, here's the second key to practicing patient parenting. You have to clarify the culture of your house. Clarify the culture of your house. What do I mean by that? Well, culture is how we do things. Your workplace has a culture. This last couple of weeks, we walked around and visited the businesses kind of here in our area with invitations to our kids' experience. And so I went into a bunch of businesses in the middle of the day, and I saw and felt, as I walked into the building, different cultures. Some felt great just walking in. Some felt like, things are not working so well here. But that's how culture is. It either is good or it's not good. And your family has a culture. And what you want is you want to create a culture that causes people to flourish, because that's what a good culture is. It gives space for people to flourish. Now, the Bible has a word for the kind of culture where people flourish. Here's the word. Honor. Honor. If you're named Timothy, that's the root word from the Greek for honor. So if you're Timothy, you're honorable. It very much has a Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the north kind of vibe to it. And those of you who know this movie, one of my favorites. The idea behind it is that you want to create a space where people can become good and virtuous, and you create a culture of honor. Now, if we don't use that word often, I think respect for most of us has that same sense, the idea that we want to create this mutuality, the mutual honor. So I'm going to honor your desires. I'm going to honor your feelings. I'm going to honor your purpose. I'm going to honor your opinion. I'm going to honor you. And you're going to do that back to me in our household. Here's what that does. This prioritizes the relationship that we have. It means that the relationship we have inside of our household is the most important thing. And if you and I can figure out how to bake honor into the culture of our house by honoring our kids and us honoring us, we set conditions so that later in life, our kids can honor us as parents. Paul quotes here, he lifts out of the 10 Commandments. You are likely familiar with the 10 Commandments in the book of Exodus chapter 20. I'm going to put on the screen what he says. He quotes here Exodus chapter 20 from the Old Testament. He says, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise of the 10 Commandments, so it may go well with you and you may enjoy long life on the earth. Now, I'm here, I understand that sometimes the 10 Commandments get lobbed into our cultural discussion. Should it be displayed on a wall? I'm not talking about that. We're Christians, so in this church, so we're for the 10 Commandments. I don't see how it's very Christ-like to force that on other people who don't agree with it. That's a whole other discussion. That's not what this message is about. But can I suggest something to you? If you've never read the 10 Commandments, if for one day all 10 of the commandments were kept, almost overnight, the world would experience a deep healing. So here's how it would work. One of the commandments is do not steal. Well, then no one would be at risk. No one would be afraid or have to lock their doors. Don't commit adultery. So there would be no cheating, no loss of trust. Don't covet other people's. So I wouldn't always be looking with dissatisfaction in my own life because I look at your life. I'd be rested. One of the commandments is take a day of rest, and we'd have a culture that doesn't burn themselves out. We'd be rested. Don't commit murder. Murder would disappear from the world. Can you see how, if you were to read those 10 commandments and say, if it were even possible for the world to keep the 10 commandments for a day, there'd be massive amounts of healing. And so the fifth commandment there is this commandment to honor your father and mother. Now, I'm going to leave a lot unsaid here because some of you're wrestling with your parents and what they did right, which maybe was minuscule. And you're wrestling with more of the things they did wrong, and you're bitter about it. How in the world would you keep honor for parents like that? I'm going to leave a lot unsaid here. I love how Oprah says this. She says, I had a terrible mom, but I learned that I could honor her for the things that she did give me. A lot unsaid there. Here's my point. This is about creating a culture in your home that you hope outlives you. And you'd be proud if your kids passed it on. My wife and I, what we want to build with our kids is good-hearted kids who do the right thing. Have you seen those videos where it's like a kid in a sport or at school and they're doing something great, they're lifting up a kid who's struggling, and then all the comments are like, this is it, this is the kind of kid we want to raise. Well, how do you raise kids that do that? You have a culture in your house that's a house of honor. And I'm not guaranteeing anything here. Paul's not guaranteeing anything. The 10 Commandments are not guaranteeing anything because people go their own way and they become adults. But it sure makes it easier. If you're wrestling with what my parents did when you're thinking about your own kids, it sure would make it easier if you treat your kids with honor, create a culture of honor. When they're adults, it sure makes it easier for them to turn and then give you honor back. Okay, how in the world do you do that? How do you do that? How do you create a culture of honor? I'm going to give you a really simple tool. Someone gave it to me. It's one of my favorite parenting tools, and it's very simple. I'm just going to call it Take a Walk. take a walk. I'll explain what I mean. Let's dig into this for just a second, because here's what Paul does. He goes in verse 4, and he talks about children obeying your parents, and then honoring your father and your mother. And then in verse 4, he says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And here's what Paul's doing. He's addressing the assumptions of Roman culture that says the father is everything. And so the house codes were always about the people underneath the power structure, what they were supposed to do. And Paul overturns the social structure, and he addresses the father. So most of the house codes would leave out verse 4, yet children obey your parents, honor your father and mother. It wouldn't say a word to the father who's in charge of the household. And Paul overturns the social structure and addresses the higher up person. In fact, the next section, if you were to keep reading in Ephesians, is about slaves and masters. And what Paul is doing there is brilliant. Because he talks about slaves, and because it was a common thing in that culture. There were slaves. And he does the same thing. He overturns the power structure at the end. He reminds the masters that they have a master. And most people who study history say what Paul did right here is subverted the institution of slavery. And it's why all Christians at all times who have understood this have always stood against slavery. I fully get that there are some Christians who have said the Bible argues for slavery. Frankly, they're wrong. Just wrong. They don't get it. They don't understand what Paul's doing. He's subverting the power structure. So he subverts the power structure of the family, and he talks to the fathers. And so this is fathers and mothers. Here's what he's saying. If you want a culture where your children obey, and you want a culture where there's honor, guess whose job it is to create it? It's ours. Parenting is hard work done under pressure. So he uses this word. He says, don't exasperate your children, which quite literally translates in the Greek to, don't come alongside them with your anger. When we brought our first son home from the hospital, I remember so vividly, we brought him in the door, in the car seat, like you do, set him, I carried him in, and I set him down in his car seat right by the front door. And I remember standing there, the stairs are right here, I can see where I was standing. And I was looking at him, and I'm thinking, oh, this is amazing. I have a son. I'm going to love this kid for the rest of this is going to be so great. Because I'd wanted to be a dad for so long. And then I had this ugly, intrusive thought. And I thought, but I'm probably going to hurt him. And when I read this, I went, you know what? I have failed at this. Many times I've exasperated my children. And I've had to ask for their forgiveness. Because it starts with me. So he says, fathers, don't exasperate your children. So can I dig into the anger for a second? This is what I'm learning myself. When we think about anger, there's, I don't know what you think about anger, but it's a thing. It happens as a human emotion. Psychologists call it a secondary emotion, meaning there's things behind it. So usually it's about three things that are behind it. You're frustrated. You had an expectation. You were trying to go somewhere. Your kids are not behaving. They're not minding. You're not doing what you asked in the time frame that you need them to do. And you're frustrated. And so you express it as anger. Or you're sad. You're sad about something that just hasn't worked in your life. And it comes out as anger because that's more convenient. Or you're just hurt. Somebody said something to you during the day as a dad or a mom and made you mad and it hurt you. And so instead of it coming out and you expressing it as hurt, what happens is you express it as anger. It's a secondary emotion. So what that means is we're going to figure this out is we have to go beyond that. And we have to go, okay, well, if I'm frustrated, then that means I need to learn to plan better and change my expectations about what's going to, that's hard. And if I could be honest, especially as I'm just saying this to the guys in the room, often we're angry because we don't know how to admit that we're sad. And if we could learn how to grieve when something happens that brings grief to us, maybe we wouldn't be angry as much. I'm saying this to me as much as I'm saying this to you. And then could we name the hurt that we have? This is kind of like, I'm going to call it dad school or parent school, because as Christians, what we understand is even around all this experience of our anger is the love of God contains us. And we need to go to dad school and to mom school and to parent school to learn how to deal with all this. So, because here's what he says. Don't exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. What does he mean by that? The training and instruction of the Lord. That means you have to get a compass from outside yourself. Because what we're doing as parents is we're trying to train our kids in purpose and in life. That is, let me give you the Christian definition of what's the meaning of life and what is our purpose. It's in a word, it's love. We're training our kids in love. Jesus said that the great commands that a human life can fulfill. If you want to know how are you a success, according to Jesus Christ, the most successful human being who's ever lived, people still quoting him, still following what he said, still taking him at face value. I don't know a historical figure who's got more people who are listening to what he has to say. The great commands for a human life to keep are, number one, Jesus said, to love God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Find your Creator. Learn to develop a relationship with your Creator. And then second, like it, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. The word he uses for love there is not sentiment. It's not emotion. It's not we have mutual interests. It's self-sacrificial love, where your concerns become my concerns. And honestly, that's the hardest, but it's also the most rewarding. Now, you may say, well, I don't believe in Jesus. I don't know about the Bible. Great. Okay. I would love it if you did, but can I just ask you a question? I'll just put this on the screen for you. What kind of world would we create, all of us together, if every parent had as their primary goal kids grounded and trained in love? Ooh. Let me ask it again. What kind of world would we create if every parent had as their primary goal kids grounded and trained in love? That's why Jesus is the most influential person to ever live, because that's what he taught. So you need a tool. We need a tool. Here's the tool. I think about parenting as taking a walk around the block. I got this from the best dad I have ever met. Best dad I've ever met. He's a fantastic father. I've tried to pattern what I do as a dad after him, and he gave me this called the Parenting Square. And here's how it goes, okay? I'm going to give you the thumbnail version of it. When your kid is, around 0 to 4-ish, these are not hard and fast, you have to be the boss, right? You got to tell them what to do, when to do it. You don't ask their opinion. You just say, this is what you're doing. With kindness, but this is what you're doing. I'm the boss. I'm in charge. The goal is you do that successfully, so you give them a secure place to know that when you ask them something, that you're loving them as you do it, that they know that you have their best interest at heart, so that when they get into around their elementary school years, you can become the trainer. Well, this is how we do this, and this is how we put the dishes away, and this is how you go get a diaper to help your sister, and this is how we put our plates away in the sink, and this is how we fold laundry, and this is how we make our bed. You're training them. You're training them. You're training them. You're training them. I heard someone say, how do you get a respectful kid who's 16 years old? And the person said, well, what you do is you start when they're 6 and you give them 10 years of training. So you train them. And around elementary. And then when they get into kind of the teenage years-ish, again, these are not hard and fast rules. You want to start being the coach. You want to move out of now at any point you can be the boss, right? You're the parent. They're still under your roof. You can put your foot down. But you want to be the coach, and you know what a coach does? They're like, oh, you didn't get your homework done? That means you can't play today. Wow, that's terrible. That's truly awful. I mean, my kids know this tone of voice because I've said this exact thing to them. Oh, well, that's terrible for you. Right? You let them deal with the consequences of their own decisions. Wow, that's awful that happened. Oh, wow. Here's the goal, is that when they are an adult, they become your friend. Some of you have wrestled, this has turned a light bulb on for me. Some of you have wrestled with your adult parents. You're an adult, and they're still trying to be the boss, the trainer, or the coach. See, our goal, or my dad did a beautiful job of this, is when they move into adulthood, you are no longer the boss, the trainer. If they come ask for advice, give it to them. But now you move into a different role. And this might be why some of you are like, I know this is why your mother's like that. Like, that's what you're doing right now. I know. I understand. But the goal, see, you're not a friend when I've told my kids that, well, I don't like you. Well, okay, that's good. I'm not your friend. My goal is, though, my wife and I's goal is when our kids are adults, that we can become friends. That's what we're after. It's a great tool. Hope you'll screenshot it. Now, I want to just offer one little tool for you. I think we have it on the screen for you. For those of you wrestling with anger, I wrote several years ago, we did it here, a 10-day anger removal experiment. If you click the QR code, it's in your sermon notes as well. You can click the QR code to sign up. You'll get an automated email that comes to you for the next 10 days to help you work through your anger. I want to offer that to you as a tool. But can I give you one tool before we leave? Here's what you and I need as we are trying to be parents, doing the hard work that it takes to be a parent under pressure. We need a guide. We need somebody who will come alongside us and say, hey, this is the way. Now, we're Christians. I'm a Christian pastor. The message of Jesus is that you and I can have a guide, that the creator of the heavens and earth is also your father and wants to have a relationship with you. When you have a relationship with someone, you know what you do? You talk. That's what, if you don't know what prayer is, that's what prayer is. It's just talking. It's having a conversation with God. In fact, Jesus, in his most famous prayer, the Lord's Prayer, how he starts it off? First two words, our Father, saying you can have a father who is a guide as you're trying to figure out how to be a father or a mother. And I want to offer that to you. Well, would you stand with me? I'm going to pray for you. Thank you so much for coming today. We're so grateful. We've got a whole party out there with hot dogs. Please stick around and stay after the service. But I want to pray for you as we head out today and then give you a blessing, and then we'll be done. Thank you for joining us. Let's pray. God, thank you for being our Father. Thank you for being available to us. Thank you for helping us when we don't know what to do. Thank you for showing us a way full of love. Lord, we want to create the homes of honor and goodness and love. That's such a task, Lord. I pray for every parent in this room, every single parent, every divorced parent, every two mom and dad parent, every parent who feels like they're doing a great job, every parent who feels like they're just absolute failures. That you would come alongside and come close today. Help them to see that you're the parent they can imitate. They can keep going. So infuse their hearts with hope today as they learn to parent better. Thank you for your grace and your goodness and your kindness to us. We're so grateful. We pray this in your name. All God's people said, amen. Hey, it's our practice as we go together to send you out with a blessing, a good word. Blessing just means a good word. And so if you're a guest with us, you'll see some people around you, and what they hold their hands out like this, and all they're doing in doing that is saying, oh, come on, give it to me all. Don't hold anything back. And if you are comfortable doing that, you're welcome to do that, but just receive this blessing in any way as you go. You're sent now to know the love of God the Father, who sent God the Son to die on the cross for someone like you and like me, so that you can have hope and a guide. You're sent to love that God in return, to love the people who are made in his image, to serve them in Jesus' name this week. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.